So welcome everybody. I am here today talking with Jessica Swanson. Jessica is the CEO and founder of Summit Health Services, which is an applied behavior analysis provider with over 20 locations. She holds certifications as a board certified behavior analyst, BCBA, as well as qualified behavior analyst, QBA, serving on the board of directors for the QABA. Jessica is also an advisor to Pathfinder Health, Hip Health, and Avocado Health. Additionally, she is the owner of Redpoint Consulting, which offers business coaching to small business owners, and co-founder of Admin Clinic, which pairs top-notch administrative support with ABA companies. Jessica serves on the board of directors of the UDNF and co-chairs PEER, P-E-E-R, that is. Committed to supporting military family and spouses, she offers training and career opportunities in the field of ABA. Her dedication to improving the lives of individuals with autism and their families is central to both her professional and personal endeavors. And that's a quite remarkable bio there, Jessica. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you today, and thank you very much for giving us your time.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, well, I thought maybe we could start with the very last couple of words there, because I know that you have a really personal connection to the field of ABA and early intervention, your personal endeavors. What are you referring to there? I think perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so everything that I have accomplished is because of my daughter. She was born in 2012, and soon after, I pretty much knew something was a little bit different about her. And when she was 2, she got her diagnosis of autism, and she is still level 3, which is considered profound, and she's non-speaking. But she's the center of our lives and has given me such specific direction in this field to continuing to help her, and who I like to refer to my clients as her friends. She doesn't know them personally, but this community is just, it's important because I see it in a lot of different ways. And the most important lens is through motherhood.
Absolutely. And she was not born in the United States, I understand.
Yeah, she was born in South Korea. My husband and I were stationed there. He was active duty military, still is, but at that time we were stationed there. And she was born in Seoul, South Korea, on American soil. So, but we do remind her that she is from South Korea.
And how you said that you received the diagnosis when she was around 2 years old. Were you still in Korea at
Yes.
that time or back in the States?
No, due to the military, we had moved. We were living in Texas at that time, and that's where she received her diagnosis about a week before we had to move again. And then she started services for autism in Alabama. So in just 2.5 years, we had seen a lot of different places, but that's where we started her journey through autism interventions.
What was sort of your experience of that? I mean, you obviously now work with families who are going through that experience. I mean, at that time,
Yeah.
did you know anything about ABA when you received that diagnosis?
I did not. I did not. I remember when the psychologist handed me her diagnosis, which at that time was considered PDD-NOS, so pervasive developmental delay not otherwise specified, which is no longer technically a diagnosis. That would be considered level 1, which we now know was not correct. She actually was level 3.
Mm.
But no, I didn't know anything. But as she handed me that paper, she said she really needs behavior therapy, but good luck trying to find it because there's a really long wait list in most places. So that was my first time ever hearing it, which was surprising to me because I had worked with autism populations, elementary school age, for a couple years before. In my 20s, working as a substitute teacher or paraprofessional, and actually I did work in Korea as a teacher as well. And so I'd never heard of behavior analysis at all. So that was very surprising to me. And I had just completed my second degree at that time in communication disorders, which, focuses on speech pathology and those things. So I had no idea what ABA was, but I soon tried to learn as much as I possibly could, and somehow found a place that didn't have a wait list when we moved to Alabama and got her started. And within a short amount of time, I realized this was the best thing that ever happened to her.
How old was she when she began ABA services then?
Yeah, we were very lucky. So she got her diagnosis at 2.5, and within 3 weeks, she had started
Oh, wow.
therapy.
That's an unusual.
Very unusual.
Yeah.
Very unusual. Yes.
Well, it's an unusual story, I think, in let's say the developed economies where there is a high demand for these services, and I'm speaking to you from Vietnam, and very often the access to services is not necessarily a problem of waiting list, but a problem of cost, and I think it's a sort of different experience for different places around the world. I know we've had several
Yes.
clients over the years who've gone to the United States with the promise of services, but then arriving and realizing that the place that they're locating to, there is quite a long way to get through the bureaucracy and the diagnosis and the access to services. So it sounds like you were very lucky there. What did your program look like then when it began?
Yeah, so she received, one-on-one ABA therapy for about 20 hours a week, so 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And mostly it was DTT, discrete child training. There was some other net or naturalistic techniques taught to her, but at that time it was mostly DTT. And that's as far as I really knew. I didn't really know what questions to ask her providers because they just didn't understand what was going on. She had a lot of therapy in home as well, but most of it was in the clinic. So I didn't see a lot of it. And then in home, I tried to pay attention as much as possible, but I kind of wanted to give some space too, because it looked like, they were running programs that I didn't understand. And I also had a newborn at that time too. And so I knew good things were happening, but I didn't really know the questions to ask. Her providers were fantastic. And, but I still felt like I didn't really know what to do as a parent at home when her therapists weren't there.
And so, what did you do about that? The not knowing.
Well,
You obviously know a
yeah,
lot now. So how did you get from there to here?
sure. Yeah, so I decided I had talked to my husband and said, I think I need to get my master's in ABA and find out how to best support our daughter, Isla. And he said, okay, because I didn't know any other way besides trying to become an expert. And so I did. I went back to graduate school and did everything I
Where did you
needed
study?
to do. I'm sorry.
Which graduate school did you study?
Yeah, I went to Ball State, which I was lucky. They had an online program that was
Mm.
fantastic, and so I was able, because we moved again between Alabama, then we moved to North Carolina, so I was able to continue my studies, which was great, and then accrue my hours to be able to sit for the QBA exam.
And how did you accrue your hours as a parent? Was that all with your daughter Isla?
No, no, none of it was with my daughter. It was all in the field, working with other kiddos with autism. And I took a job as a registered behavior therapist in North Carolina,
Yeah.
and worked in the clinic and in home there, and got my hours that way.
Okay, and so what was that like? I mean, I'm a parent of three children. I don't have any children diagnosed with autism. I know obviously from my work how stressful that must be for a parent.
Yeah.
Was that tough going out and working with other children, or was it helpful?
Yeah,
What's
that's
the
such a
story?
great question. It's such a great question. So, I don't think it was any more difficult than having a job outside the home. It was challenging, just kind of balance. I was still in graduate school. My husband was, and still was military, so he was gone a lot. So trying to balance that was tough, but I really enjoyed it. And I think that is when I realized that not only was I going back to school to help my own daughter, I was going back to help so many other kids. And that's when I realized I really wanted to help as many kids as possible, including my daughter. So it gave me that great experience to work in the field and realize like my path was really targeted. I knew at that time what I wanted to do once I got my credentials.
And so from those early days, you know RBT, you worked your way up through to
Mhm.
well, your BCBA and your QBA. Which one came first?
Yeah, so actually after I had my my behavior therapist certification, I actually got my QASPS,
Okay.
so my qualified autism service practitioner supervisor certification under the QABA. And I had that for about 6 months before I sat for my BCBA because the QBA did not exist at that time. I got that straight away, so I was very happy about that. And then about less than a year later, the QBA was available, and I was able to get that and become one of the first 15 certificates of that
Oh wow.
certification. So
So
very proud of that
you're
fact.
one of the
Yeah.
very first QBAs
Yes.
that are out there. And then when did you join the board for the QABA?
I joined the board about 6 months after that. So I think I've been on the board for about 3.5 years now.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. And then at the same time you were establishing your company. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Who are you? And you've got lots of locations you mentioned throughout the US, your
Yes.
bio. So tell us a bit about that.
Yes. So the intention was when I had that epiphany of I wanted to help as many kids as possible, and I was working in the field as a behavior therapist. In addition to my daughter, I had thought, well, when my husband retires from the military, that's when I'll do it. Well, we had gotten orders again, so we moved this time to California. So that's another move in this journey. We moved to a place where ABA was really hard to come by, very long wait list. And I thought, well, this might be a good place to start.
Hmm.
So I did. And I did everything from direct support for my clients, parent training, modification, billing, credentialing, everything I needed to do to help my kiddos. And I started my practice that way.
Okay, and what's the practice look like now? You have locations throughout
Yeah.
the country.
Yeah, so primarily my clients are military families, so they're kind of in the same boat as I am, where we move a lot maybe every year, maybe every 2 to 3 years. Sometimes you're lucky to get to stay a little longer, but you often are moving a lot. And what I realized in my first place where I started was Monterey, California, was I had a lot of kids that were moving, and they were going to places where the parents were telling me, "Oh gosh, the wait lists are so long. Is there any way that you can expand?" And I thought, all right, well, let me see if I can. So from there, I just hired the very, very best practitioners I could find. And the criteria I always have for everybody that works for me is would I trust them with my own nonverbal daughter?
Mm.
And the answer has to be yes. And that's how I expanded. So I expanded to Southern California because I had some clients moving down there. And then I had kids moving to Virginia, and I started there, and Texas, Alabama. And so now I'm in 10 different states, and my locations are primarily all outside of military installations, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. And something that's really cool that I love is we're able to transfer our kids within our company. So if we have a kid that's in Southern California and they're moving, their parents get orders and they're moving that summer to Virginia, we get ready for them. And here in the States, it does indicate a new referral and insurance and things like that, but we're able to navigate it because we've become experts with working with military families. So instead of kids waiting, years or months for services, which is not uncommon, our kiddos stay within our company, and we provide parent support through that transition. And then we're able to restart direct as soon as possible, sometimes as short as like just a few weeks once they get to their new location, which is pretty unheard of in this high demand area. So we're really proud to be able to do that for our kids.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's a real logistical solution, and I'm kind of intrigued because I operate in Vietnam, and you speak about hiring behavioral therapists and gosh, if only there were loads of trained and qualified behavioral therapists around to hire. The experience that we have, and I think that many on the QABA certificate register have, who are not operating in North America, but around the world globally, is I think one of our primary challenges is finding good people. And I think at the end of the day, we all end up needing to train people very often from scratch. I mean, we're a QABA provider of services, particularly so we can certify our own team. I'm interested to sort of hear I mean, do you find it's relatively straightforward to find people in the various states that you're operating who've come through university programs, etc.? Where do you get your staff from?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So, no, not usually. So, what I developed and for my own company is we have our own fellowship program where we take people that really don't know much about ABA and we do a training program with them. I'm also a QABA coursework provider, and so I get people trained for the ABAT so they can work in the field, and they're trained by me and my staff who I've trained. So they're getting that top tier, really good habits from the beginning. So we do a really intensive program with them. In addition to the 40-hour requirement, we give them almost 3 times, 4 times as much training as that before we put them in the field. Something that's really great is once I tell people about behavior, I tell them about the ABAT, I say, listen, I only want you to come into and work and be part of this company if you want to be in behavior long term. That means you can be an ABAT for your whole career, or if you want to move up to the QASPS or QBA, we're going to provide that mentorship and supervision that you need to be successful. So I have a lot of ABATs that are in practicum to become assistants and analysts. So I kind of make my own. I have been lucky, and I have had some really great behavior therapists that have come to me from other places, or they've moved to different locations where I am, or great BCBAs and QBAs that have come as well. But we do have a really great program within where we kind of make our own amazing team.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is you also need, even in the United States, you also need to train people from scratch. There is this
We do.
something like a myth of, this world where there's all these therapists around that you can just hire off the streets is
Yeah,
not actually.
no. No, and that just kind of goes towards, the pervasive issue of just being understaffed, because we have more kids and more people that are getting identified with autism and needing that support, which is fantastic. And just trying to keep up with that demand has been very difficult in the States. So, yeah, it is very tricky, but that's why we developed a program where we can really, foster their development and behavior from the get-go.
And, you know, given your own experiences of ABA, you spoke about, the positivity, the impact that ABA had for Isla, for your daughter, and that's great. But you also speak to the fact that you didn't really feel like you understood everything that was happening to the point that you actually went back to school to learn more. How has that experience influenced the way
Yeah.
you practice now? What have you infused into your own approach that's perhaps an advancement on that?
Yeah. So I found out when I started graduate school, there was a thing called parent training that was available. And I just never really knew about it. And I thought, wow, what a great opportunity. Of course, we should teach the parents what we're doing. So yeah, that is something that we do in our company. Insurance has mandates and things like that, but we exceed that. We really try to meet with our parents at least
What is
once
the
a week.
insurance mandate on parent training, just out of interest?
Sure. Yeah, so it varies by insurance
Mm.
payers, but it's becoming more and more of a requirement where you have at least like 6 contacts with the parent and that documented parent training per authorization, which is usually about 6 months, which I think is great, but I don't think it's enough.
No.
So that's why I do really highly suggest parents meet with me or our therapist, not our therapist, our parents every week, and that's done by supervisors or assistants, and we get that opportunity to teach parents those ABA skills that can help them at home. We get to show them their programming and all the amazing things that they're doing. And then the most important thing that I love doing about parent training is that most of our kiddos have autism. Some of them don't, but most of them do, and a lot of them have comorbid conditions, and parents are really used to hearing a lot from specialists and doctors of all the things their kids can't do or where they're not meeting. But we as behavior analysts get a chance every week during parent training to not only teach them skills to help with their child with their best live their best life, but we get to remind them that their kids are awesome, that they're perfect, and we're just here to work together to let them live their best life possible. And that's really, really the root of why I like to do parent training.
And it sounds like the approach that you've got is one which is, let's call it more organic. It's kind of conversation based. It's not, stood in a room.
Yes.
Here's a whiteboard. Let's talk through the theory.
No, no whiteboard. Yeah, no, it's kind of like in this modality. Some of them I do virtually, but when I'm lucky enough to do it in person, we're sitting next to each other. I'm showing them some graphs, but we're just communicating and talking. I'm modeling how to demonstrate, some of the things that they can do to help their kiddos at home, and just have a great, conversation. Get to pair with them, get to know them, get to find out what things are happening in the environment that I don't always hear if I just ask them like rote questions like, oh, how are you? What are you doing today? Like, you gotta have those authentic conversations because here's the thing, if parents don't like you, they're not gonna trust you with their most prized possession, their child. So you better start pairing. It's an ABA principle that we don't want to forget.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're speaking about using words like authenticity, and it instantly brings to mind Carl Rogers and the sort of humanistic counseling approach, which the field of ABA has, I think, in some occasions, thrown out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, yes, we have an empirical science. Yes, it's an alternative to humanistic attitudes. That's a very famous part of our history. It's the mentalism versus the empiricism, but there are nonetheless, I think, really, really important skill sets that we as behavior analysts would be wise to learn and to abide by. And I think it's particularly in the area of engagement and building relationships with our clients, because that is something which is difficult to quantify. Using our data recording procedures, etc. Even with the children, I would say, but certainly with the clients. And you've had your experience as a parent, and you know how important it is and how left out you might feel if you don't have that relationship. I mean, for myself, I know that going back to school and studying general psychology at a graduate level definitely gave a skill set and rounded off, I think, what we all need as behavior analysts, which is to understand that, well, exactly what you said. We've got to have this authentic relationship with the client and with the parents, because
Yes.
otherwise we don't have that trust. And if we don't have that, we're dealing with high stress situations, and decision making can go one way or the other very often.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm always person-centered, right? And I remind my therapist all the time, these are kids. I mean, we do have adults too, but mostly we have kids. So, they're human beings. We're not asking them to be robots. We're not asking for 100% compliance. I never write a program like that.
Yeah.
I don't ever ask them to make direct eye contact. I make sure I connect with adults that have autism, that have experienced therapy, and what are the things they like, what things they didn't like, and make sure I fold that into my practice. We have a lot of really great resources out there. And I think, to your point, like naturalistic, being authentic, is it reasonable to, have a kid sit in a chair for, 30 minutes and have so the BCBA has instructional control for a 5-year-old? Like, no, absolutely not. They're going to wiggle in their chair. They might try to pretend to fall out. Those are natural, appropriate behaviors. And so I'm very much aware of, people that are really I don't want to say by the book, because I think we have really good literature now that shows otherwise, that we need to make sure that, yes, we're objective, we're measuring, we're doing all the data things, but also be compassionate. Meet all of our clients with empathy and compassion, just like you would anybody. They just need a little bit more support, and we have these really great tools, but remember that they're human, and that they deserve empathy and trust, and like for you to be the person that helps them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that classic, almost archetypal journey that most professionals go through in this field of, you come out of graduate school and it's very rules focused, and it's like, this is
Yes.
how we do, this is how everything needs to be done, and then I think, 20 years down the line, you know full well that, well, there's always exceptions to rules, and there's always more than the rules that we need to, take into account. And it is there. I'm not wanting to imply that I mean, particularly, I know You know, you look at the competency lists for all of our qualifications within the QABA, and you know, there's person-centered planning that's in there. I mean, these are relatively new additions, I think, in the
Hmm.
evolution of
Yes.
ABA as a field that I mean, there's that. The other big one is learner assent. I mean, that's what you were getting at
Yes.
there. I mean, that's a
Yep.
very welcome arrival. I remember I was trained back in the day where things like escape extinction procedures were
Mm, yeah.
the preferred method. You know, you just,
Yep.
if the child doesn't want to do it, you just keep doing it until they listen, and you know, you break
Yeah.
back. And yeah, it works, but you know, you lose loads of clients along the way doing it. And you know, look,
Yeah.
there's a time and a place to do these things. Always, we know our science, and we know that the effect that these can have. But I
Yeah.
think the fact that we've seen this more person-centered approach filter into
Hmm.
the field is a really welcome evolution. I think it's definitely you know, something to be proud of. And
Absolutely.
I feel as somebody, I mean, I've probably got about the same as you. I mean, I've 20 something years working, and I feel like I'm apologizing less and less these days for working in our field.
Yes.
We've evolved, I think, more and more, and we are including and sort of explicit mention of the necessity
Yeah.
for a more humanistic side to what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, we consider ourselves a field of in our infancy, right? We're still growing and learning, and we've learned a lot in the
Yeah.
last, 2 decades specifically. And, we have really great people in the field really leading the way. Dr. Gregory Hanley with My Way, without having to use extinction procedures and things like that. I mean, they're revolutionizing this field and really putting us in a position where people really understand what we're doing. They understand that we are putting their child or loved one first, and that we just want to help them live their best life. I'm never going to try to change who they are. They're perfect the way they are.
Mhm.
But if they're running into the street, that's dangerous. That's not going to be safe. If they're engaging in self-injurious behaviors, that's not safe. I
Mm.
want to let them live their best life, so they can thrive.
Yeah, I love that expression. Let people live their best life, because we're not providing a cure for autism, and that's something that I think
Correct.
we all encounter as
Yes.
practitioners. This, you know, and of course we're all very sensitive to it. You know, my child is broken. You need to fix it,
Yes.
and that's
Yeah.
not obviously what ABA is doing. We're
Mhm.
helping people to live their best life, and for one person that might be mainstream school integration. You
Mhm.
know, no more services, which is wonderful when it happens, but there's no guarantees of that at
Correct.
any point. And I mean, there are a number of factors, obviously, that contribute to the success and the outcome of a program. But ultimately, you know, your inheritance of who you are is a part of that. And, you know, we can't necessarily change everything, but, you know, helping people to achieve their potential. What would you say? I mean, apart from being more humanistic, what's the other area in which ABA is really evolving as we sort of go into the future?
Yeah, like you mentioned before, like Ascent, like I try to, as long as I can communicate to my clients, getting their permission
Hmm.
is really critical. I think that's not always widespread yet in the field, but I hope it's becomes more and more
So
something that we all practice.
to clarify, you said assent, getting their permission, and I want to be clear for anybody listening. So
Yeah,
we're talking
sure.
about the child here. We're not. I mean, there's consent from the parents for what we do, but
Right. So Ascent is actually from our client, right? And asking them, hey, we're going to work on this program because we want to try to really help you in school with sitting and raising your hand. How's that sound? That pretty cool? That good? If not, okay, well, let's figure out a different way. Maybe there's another way that we can, maybe we can sit on the floor. Maybe we can work that out. Let's try to manipulate the environment in a way that you're going to be successful, that we can still let you participate as much as we can. Obviously my higher functioning, if you will, learners will maybe understand that more. But even my nonverbal, they're just as high functioning, a lot of them, and being able to make sure I can communicate that to them and they can communicate it back to me. So really presuming competence always, always, always is huge. But really putting that into practice, right? We always say presume competence. What does that mean? Well, yeah, we want to make sure we're speaking correctly in front of them as if they're there, because they are. I still see practitioners that don't always do that. But also ask them. Don't just talk in front of them about what the plan is. Ask them, hey, is this cool? Is this good? When they're old enough to join an IEP meetings, invite them. They definitely deserve a seat at the table,
I think one of the
and just
areas,
including them.
yeah, I think one of the areas where this topic of assent is quite challenging for particularly newcomers to the field, the practitioners, is understanding how we achieve this when we're working with our, level 3
Hmm.
learners, like Isla,
Yeah,
like your daughter.
right. My daughter. Yeah,
Even if that there is more to communication than verbal behavior, and
correct.
a child might be nonverbal, and I know that we have this conversation frequently, particularly with our QASPS team.
Hmm.
That it becomes more of a thing. You got to really understand this topic as you go into that, and this idea that like something as basic as a reinforcer assessment can be a very effective means of determining learner assent. Is the child
Correct.
motivated by the situation in which you're in? We may not be able to literally ask for permission or even understand an answer back, but there's certainly ways
Correct.
that we can test that.
Oh,
It's one
for
of the
sure.
challenges that we encounter, and I think the shift, as I can see it, has been away from, well, this child is nonverbal, so we'll just have to make decisions on their behalf, and we're going to have to push through
Yeah.
this, and
Yeah.
escape extinction or whatever. But now we're recognizing that no, actually, it's our responsibility, because all
Hmm.
behavior is communication, and if that child isn't willingly sitting there and engaging with the learning task, we
Hmm.
need to raise questions about how we're approaching this.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons, one of the first two things I teach my nonverbal are stop and break.
Mm.
So they can tell me when they want to stop or if they need a break, and always honoring that request. I mean, my daughter, she communicates mostly on her AAC device. It's an iPad that has language acquisition motor planning software that works for her. And one of the first buttons that was put on there was stop.
Okay.
And she uses it. She she's never said any words in her life, but she will communicate very clearly
And
when she doesn't want something.
I have a question for you on that, because
Sure.
this is something else that comes up. Does she ever misuse it? I mean, are there
Yeah.
times where it's like, no, hang on, no, you can't
Sure.
stop. We're working.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's the thing is I always presume whatever she says is what she meant. Now, if she accidentally does it, so and let's say she says stop and I stop,
Hmm.
but then she clearly wants to keep going. If I'm tickling her or something like that, I'll say, "Oh, you said stop. It seems like you might have meant," and I'll point. And I don't do hands over hands for AC. I'll just point. Seems like you want to say go. Seems like maybe that's what you meant, and then she'll do it. Or so I always try to give her that opportunity, but I always presume whatever she touches is what she wants. Um, but not everyone does it that way. I just know that I think it's important to respect. And I also think that there's a time for, kids to babble on, just like they babble when they're learning to speak, same with their device. So if they want to hit different buttons and try to figure stuff out and just say like, oh, you want to go? Oh, that's so silly. Let's go. All right. And then they kind of figure out what the word means. And I'm telling you, even, my daughter, she's actually one of the most severely impacted people with autism I've ever had. She's really a really tough case, and for her to be able to use it, I just know that so many of my learners they can, and I always respect what they say.
Yeah, and I think the other side that I'm wanting to touch on as part of this conversation, just for, I guess, new practitioners to the field who are struggling with this, is the other
Hmm.
end of it is, okay, learner assent is desirable, and it's our responsibility to maximize that. But
Hmm.
a lot of the questions that then come back from the team are, well, what if the child is just being stubborn and refusing to engage with the learning process?
Hmm.
Does this mean that we can never learn about that, because we have to have,
Yeah.
and I think it's coming back to, well, there is the learner assent piece, and it's extraordinarily important. But we're
Hmm.
also talking about least restrictive environments to produce the outcomes that are necessary to
Yeah.
the well-being of the individual, and that no 5-year-old is entirely responsible for the decisions that are made across
Correct.
their lives.
Absolutely.
It's a recognition of, we need to maximize the assent. We need to use the least restrictive means possible
Hmm.
at all times. But that doesn't mean that we're never allowed to apply something a little bit more rigid if
Of course.
we've exhausted everything else first, I guess is the point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was the same. My son is 2 years younger, and it's the same thing. Like he'll, verbally say, stop, no. And I'll say, okay, well, I hear that you don't want to go to bed. I hear you. But sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do, and we have to do that. So I'll let you play for 5 more minutes, and then we'll go to bed. So same thing with my daughter. If she requests, stop or break, I'll say, okay, listen, I'll give you a 1 minute break, but then we got to get back to work. There's going to be stuff that we got to do sometimes. We don't always want to do it, but we got to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's just, helping them live their best life because there's going to be expectations. And I think just because my daughter is nonverbal and profoundly autistic doesn't mean that she doesn't have any expectations, within our household. When it's time to go to bed, we got to go to bed.
Yeah.
We need to sleep. And I know because I'm your mom and I'm still going to make those decisions sometimes. So I hear you. I honor your request within reason, but we got to go to bed.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think it's really important for professionals to understand this, that it's not one extreme or the other, that there's a middle
Correct.
that we travel.
Yeah.
And I think that what the Ascent movement has brought in is a broader spectrum of options that are advocated for and well now mandated into our practices, and that's a great thing. I mean, we need both ends of the spectrum, but we certainly need to be leaning as far as possible towards least restrictive practices in
Absolutely.
that we do.
Yeah. And then for my learners that are able to communicate more like we are verbally, I say, listen, these are the things that we got to get done during session today. These are like the things that we have to do, but we can do them in any order that you want. So like, what do you want to do? And we can do fun things too. And we'll make a schedule and I'll look and we'll discuss them like, all right, it seems like we probably have enough time for that. So let's figure it out and go from there. I mean, just something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, make something from like, oh gosh, I have to go to, therapy and I don't want to, and all these things like, okay, oh, well, listen, I get to do this really cool thing, get to play a really fun game with some peers, pretty cool. And then I have to do this one thing, but then I get to do this other thing with peers, and then I get to go outside and, give them as much of a choice as possible whenever you can.
And this is, it calls to mind the influence onto the field of, this sort of third wave movement. We're talking Stephen Hayes and the ACT,
Yes.
methodology. And I think that what that's really brought into the field of behaviorism is, another dimension, I think, of the sort of reinforcement story. That with our learners who are able to verbally engage with us, particularly our older learners who may be questioning, why they're doing things, not so much like, what's my reinforcer that it's immediately coming from this, but conditioning up, let's say, more natural reinforcers that are more mature, like you want to graduate high school, you want to go and do this thing, you want to be able to live in these circumstances, and so this idea of connecting with meaning, connecting with really long-term goals.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's something which certainly, again, we've seen as a really welcome addition and evolution within the field of ABA, that we're not always working for immediate extrinsic rewards that are, I'm using language that's not very ABA there, but I think we also need to communicate with the outside world about how we think and act, and it's necessary sometimes to adapt. But it's not always about those immediate reinforcers. That there is that there are things, deeper things that we can connect with, that are equally as powerful, if not more powerful, than things that we immediately get put into our hand as a consequence for completing a task.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had learners that have, come to me and, they really love drawing. And, we'll talk about it and, it comes out like, I really want to be a cartoonist when I get older. Like that is awesome. That's great. Okay, well, great. Now I know something really cool about them and we can use that. All right. You want to be a cartoon artist. Great. What do you think we need to do to get there? Well, I probably need to finish school. You're probably right. So let's figure out how we can get to that step, and take that, it's a task analysis for life, right? Okay, this is the goal. Let's break it down to targets. and explain that to our learners. Okay, yeah, I want you to get there too. I want you to live on your own. I want you to be able to go to school. I want you to be able to, to go on a date. Let's think about what are all those skills. Let's work them on together. I'll help you because I know some stuff about, programming and helping you out with all that. And we'll come up with a plan. Let's do it. And getting them to buy in on their own life. I mean,
Yeah. And ultimately, I mean, that is
yeah,
the ultimate reinforcer. It's the ultimate
absolutely.
process because, I think we in the field of behavior analysts are often wrongly characterized as being all about these tangible rewards, and it's
Yeah.
the chocolate or the star charts and all
Treat
the rest.
training,
Yeah,
I've heard. Yeah. I'm like, no, that's not it.
yeah. And we're all aiming
Yeah.
for this sort of golden egg of let's get you to the point that you're just reinforced by the long-term outcomes that we're all
Yeah.
reinforced by, because that's ultimately, we need to, our responsibility is ultimately to teach our learners to respond to the same reinforcers and punishers as exist in the real world, and that's
Absolutely.
ultimately where we're all heading is hopefully for a meaningful life. I think
Absolutely.
that third way RFT Act movement
Hmm.
has really brought some of the spotlight onto that, which is a really welcome part of I think our
Absolutely.
spectrum of skills that we're now all learning about. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
I'm delighted to see that some of that training now across the platforms is accredited and is recognized as being part of our credentialing, and I think it's great. Maybe we could shift to talk a little bit about the QABA and
Yeah.
what's in your view. We all, many of us, I'm assuming, know the story that it was just the BACB first, and then
Hmm.
things changed. I was certainly one of the people I was BCABA certified. I was ready to go BCBA, and then things changed, and me
Yeah.
living in Vietnam, suddenly that wasn't an option anymore. And
Hmm.
the QABA was there. So for the international community, certainly the QABA makes a heck of a lot of sense. It's ANSI accredited, and it is I think in every respect that I'm aware of, certainly as good as, if not better than, the BACB. But it allows access to these qualifications for people all over the world. We've got a
Yeah.
rapidly growing community of QABA certified people here in Vietnam, as well as all around our region. There's people being certified. So maybe you could sort of tell us a little bit about what is your understanding of the
Yeah.
vision of the QABA as a board member.
Yeah, so I joined the board because I really believed in the whole mission of what we're doing. So there's a couple of different things. One is obviously the autism component. It is a requirement in all three credentials to have knowledge of that, which is important, especially since, at least for my practice, 99% of my clients have an autism diagnosis. So it's important to know, the people that we're treating, right? It's like being a cardiologist and knowing about the heart just makes sense. The other component is the international component. So I am a huge believer in making sure that evidence-based practice as behavior analyst stays in the hands of behavior analysts internationally. There's no boundary to autism. There's no boundary to behavior analysts working. So we need to make sure that we have really good ethics and a board that we follow the principles of our practice to make sure that we're always delivering with high integrity. What I don't want to happen is people claim that they're a behavior analyst under no credentialing board and do ABA in not the right way. That would be like, certifying a cardiologist somewhere with that, or working as a cardiologist without a certification doing heart surgery. That makes no sense at all. That's
Mm,
dangerous.
mm,
That's the same with ABA. Bad ABA is not good for anybody. It's not good for providers. It's not good for consumers. It's not good for anybody. So the international component was really important to me to make sure that the whole globe has access to making sure that they are part of a very highly qualified credentialing board. And as far as the alternative board, I mean, QEBA is really leading the way. We were the first ones to certify our behavior therapist. The ABAT was the first certification or certification. I always get credentialing and certification mixed up.
Yeah.
Certification for our first line behavior therapists that are working in the field. So we were already setting the standard on that. We started with providing CEUs, but also mandating CEUs for our line therapists to make sure they always stay up to date on their knowledge, not just assistants and analysts as well. And now the other board is following suit on that too. So we're really paving the way, I feel, and making sure that we always stay top tier in the world of behavior analysts.
What's the biggest challenge of being, I guess, North American and global, and how does, because it's so we're in this
Yes.
global community. How do we navigate that?
Well, I'll tell you right now, the time zone, right? You and I are about 14 hours apart.
Yeah.
So the time zone is actually very, very tricky because of that. Also, making sure that we're translated into different languages to be able to access different people in different parts of the world, which we are continuing to, be available. We're available in Japanese and Korean, and we just keep growing into different languages. So that's a little bit of a barrier that we're figuring out. But as long as we see the need, and we do, we're going to continue to expand and have that access to people that want to be credentialed.
Yeah, the language piece is difficult. I mean, we're obviously operating out of Vietnam, and that's going well. A requirement for us is that our team at this stage speak English. I mean, we provide lots of programs in Vietnamese as well.
Mm-hmm.
The key challenge is it's more than just translating the exams into a local language. It's okay. Well, you've got the exams, then you need all of the CEU credits, and not just some, but enough that it's an enriching experience every cycle of recertification, that there are.
Right.
CEUs available in your local language. Then it's, what about the research? What about the books? What about, it's the whole package. It's the whole system that it's not just about translating exam questions. I think it can give an advantage to people, because I think exam questions are often quite nuanced, and there's a magic word in there that you've got to pay attention to know that it's this,
Yep.
That it's SD, it's not an EO or whatever, but it's more complicated than people realize, I think, a lot of the time, to migrate this into different languages around the world. But then what I'd also say in response to that is, AI is getting really good at
Yes, it is.
solving that problem. Translation capability is skyrocketing. We don't necessarily need to keep ourselves up to date with the field by reading every detail of a research article, that we can get good summaries. Again, AI produces this and translates it very well into other languages.
Yes.
Where the translation falls down as well is, ABA is a very technical vocabulary. There's a lot of words, and I'm speaking from the point of view of Vietnamese. There's a lot of words that just do not translate, and it's like, well, what do you do with those? And I know many languages just keep the original word and embed it into the local language. Some languages don't. It's complicated to approach this issue.
Yeah, and that's where we also have a big component on our international board as well. So we do have representatives from many different countries that work with us directly to be able to make sure that we are meeting that need that you brought up about the translation, and being able to not just translate the actual, question, but the context as well. So we are very mindful of that, and that's why we do have that international component that is actively part of the QABA.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes over the next 10 years. Does the evolution of artificial intelligence displace the need for us to be translating everything into foreign languages, and how sophisticated does it get to, and how quickly does it get there? Well, that's great. I think we could probably carry on talking for a very long time, Jessica,
I
and
know.
maybe we can again in the future. But I think for now,
Would love that.
let's wrap things up with, I guess, a closing question, which is, you know, what do you feel, globally, people around the world who might be watching this or just generally looking into the QABA, what's your reason, do you think, for people coming to the QABA? Where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, people are coming to the QABA because we are holding the standard and really driving where behavior analysts should be going in the future. The international component is going to ensure that we stay relevant globally, that we are always practicing, no matter where you go in the world, you are able to receive top-notch ABA because you're under the QABA. And that's something I'm really proud of to
Okay,
be a part
perfect.
of.
Well, I can finish up by saying thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
for the work that you're doing, and thank you for the time that you've invested into the field. Thank you to Isla for bringing you
Yes.
to us. I think that's
Yes,
her contribution to the field and to the world,
absolutely.
and it's definitely a better place for all of that. So I will say goodbye there, and hope to see you again.
Likewise. Thanks, Tony.